Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, how's it going? Are you doing okay? I'm all right. The week we're currently at the start of is half term, so my kids are home, plus it's my birthday week, so there's lots of fun to be had. I worked extra hard the past week to line up more podcast content than usual, so I can take this week off safe in the knowledge that there's episodes at the ready. This week, I'm sure you're more than aware, is also the run-up to Halloween. Halloween, like Christmas and birthdays, is another tricky time to navigate if you're sustainability minded, particularly if you have kids. So Halloween can be a real source of fun for kids, and it was when I was a kid also. Because I have a birthday so close to Halloween, I had a number of Halloween-themed birthday parties growing up and such. But over the years in the UK, I've just been exposed to so much Halloween stuff in films and so on that it's really become super Americanised over here. I'm not knocking the spirit of the whole Halloween tradition. It really does look like a lot of fun from what I can see. But I feel like the UK has somehow adopted a lot of the worst parts. The cheap, plasticky, virtually disposable costumes, and the nastier, greedier side of trick-or-treat, often without the celebratory community aspects that I think are probably experienced in North America. That's my feeling anyway. So I've been trying to navigate that over the last week. I've been trying to find the balance, as ever, between helping my kids participate and enjoy themselves, but creating as little impact as possible. So their school hosts a Halloween disco that the kids are able to dress up for. I scored both kids excellent costumes in the local charity shop. And I know what you might be thinking, but you can sew. Honestly, making costumes doesn't really excite me. I just don't think it's a good use of my sewing time unless they're costumes that are going to see loads of wear. And my kids are kind of over dressing up for play these days. So we got the costumes, and they can also wear them at a Halloween party we're going to at a friend's house this week. I'm not really into my kids going trick-or-treating, so I'm not sure if they're going to do that at all. I kind of hate all the sweets and excessive plastic packaging that goes along with it. And in general, I'm just not really sure that I want them doing it. So that's something I'm still needing to make a final decision on. With parenting, it can just be so easy to let your kid do the thing that all their friends are doing, like having plastic tat-filled party bags at their birthday and such. But I'm just trying to take a step back and cross-reference my parenting decisions with what's going to be best for their future and our values more generally, you know. Anyway, I hope that any sewing that you've been doing has been going well. This week I've been making a jumpsuit to wear to a wedding. I'm using the wide leg jumpsuit pattern by the Assembly line, and I've got some incredible star print viscose by Fabric Godmother, which is called Dazzle. Full disclosure, I get a staff discount at Fabric Godmother, which is why I often mention their fabrics. Anyway, the jumpsuit is looking awesome, and I think it's going to be super comfy. I can absolutely imagine it wearing for loads of other things like Christmas parties and meals out and such. There have been no new patrons signing up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. However, one fabulous existing patron, Maeve, has upped the amount of support that they give, so enormous thanks to Maeve. The creation of this podcast is entirely fueled by caffeine, so if you want to help episodes appear in your feed each week, please consider signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. The price of a cup of coffee each month will go a long way to keeping things moving around these parts. So let's get cracking with today's episode. If you are feeling in any way low right now, prepare to have that turned around in the next 40 minutes or so. This conversation is with a truly vibrant individual called Brandon Hayden, and he is positivity and inspiration personified. I initially contacted him because he has an incredible approach to sewing and creates the most amazing stylish garments using thrifted fabric and alternative sources of textiles. But in this conversation, he shares so much about what he's overcome and the role that sewing has had and continues to have in him finding himself and his personal power. He's also got some really cool plans in the works that make me just basically really hopeful for the world. So if you're on Instagram, follow Brandon at Happily Dressed to receive both his messages of positivity and the visual awesomeness and inspiration. As usual, find all the links in the show notes on the website checkyourthread.com. And there is nothing else to say at this point other than enjoy. thank you so much for this. I know it's quite early where you are and you've messed around with your work for my benefit, so I'm really grateful.
Of course. I'm excited to be here.
This is so cool. Right, so let's get cracking because I've got so much I want to talk to you about. Right, let's start with, can you please tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Oh, perfect. Well, I'm Brandon Hayden. I am the founder, creator of Happily Dressed. It evolves so much, but right now it's more of like a sewing inspiration page almost, but definitely geared towards self-acceptance, self-confidence, and self-sufficiency. That's something that's so near and dear to me, and sewing has been such a great expression of my individuality. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and what fills my day currently is leather work. I sew for an amazing leather company here called Glad & Young Studio. And I'm making bags from 8 to 6, Monday through Thursday.
Amazing.
I get to do something that I love every day, so it does really fill the time. And like by the time it's over, I still have enough energy to go for a run, go cook dinner, go home. So I think I've adjusted well to this new schedule.
It's a different kind of job, isn't it, really? Like, you know, it's doing, but you still have your brain to a certain extent. So you don't feel that complete fatigue that you're like, I just have to sit on the sofa, you know?
Exactly.
So you seem so prolific. How much time are you getting to sew for yourself at the moment?
Not a lot, but I will say I've learned to really maximize my weekends for self-sewing time, and also those days where I do get off of work and I don't go run. It takes nothing, and I have to remind myself, it does take nothing for me to go home and like cut out a pattern to start sewing over the weekend, instead of trying to do all that nitty-gritty work all at once.
Right.
I've learned to diversify, like cutting out the pattern, marking the pattern, then sewing it. Those can all happen on different days, and I'm still satisfied. So the weekends are more geared to my fun and quick sewing, but then I use my weekdays to like set it all up so it can be fun and quick.
I love that. That's really cool.
And like if I can just set it up as soon as Saturday morning rolls around, or I don't work Fridays, so as soon as Friday morning rolls around, I can like wake up, get breakfast, and just start sewing. Not have to worry about marking my darts or make sure my notches are perfect. I can do that all when I get off work, then go to sleep, happy. And so I think it's been working so far. So hopefully it continues to work.
I love that. That sounds like you've got a really good setup going on. So obviously, one of the main aspects of your work that I adore is your use of thrifted and existing textiles. Like you are, okay, I'm going to use the word visionary because I would definitely say, because honestly, like, tell me, what are your motivations for working with existing textiles?
I have always thrifted my wardrobe ever since I was in high school, which was a very long time ago. Well, not super long, but
I don't think it is that long.
I'm 26, so I've been out of high school for 8 years, I think. Yeah. But when I was there, so I grew up as a twin, and I grew up in a really big family. Right. So individuality wasn't something that came easy to me, and being able to thrift my own clothes before it was cool to thrift your own clothes really gave me, or really allowed me to play around with a sense of individualism.
Cool.
And like being able to like go find things that I know that people just can't go buy from the store in quantities of 20. So it was like very important for me to find a wardrobe and an aesthetic that really felt like me without looking like everyone else. And that's where thrifting really came into play. And since then I haven't shopped retail probably in 8 years. Like maybe I'll buy like underwear and socks retail, but like clothes, shoes, jackets, like this was thrifted.
So
this
nice.
Used to be tablecloth.
I've seen that on your page. It's amazing.
Oh, yes. I had to wear something. And then even my shoes, I thrift because it's just so cool to find pieces that really speak to you and that like resonate with on a different level.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, I think it's really cool. When people ask me about thrifting, I always say it's a great test of your own expression because you'll have things that jump out at you that you wouldn't normally gravitate to, maybe in a retail environment. Whatever catches your eye, always try it on, no matter if it's 2 sizes too big or 2 sizes too small, because you're perfecting like your natural aesthetic and the energy and the vibe that you want to be for the moment in life that you're in. So thrifting is a big part in that for me. So thrifting textiles has always come kind of easy.
So it's an extension really of how you've always created your wardrobe.
Definitely. And now I get to go in and like find different fabrics, and like that's kind of the cool, and it's like a double-edged sword. It's the cool thing about sewing because I'm like, oh, I can make that. But then I'm like, oh man, I'm not thrifting clothes anymore. I'm legit just thrifting fabric to make my own clothes.
Interesting.
Which kind of like makes that process of like getting that wardrobe a little longer because like I'm not getting completed pieces anymore, like a shirt and a pant and a jacket. Now I'm like, oh, I have this fabric for a shirt. I have this fabric for a jacket, but I still have to make it.
Yeah, so it's slowed the process down a bit.
It does, but it's well worth it,
Yeah.
definitely.
I have to go back to a really obvious question. How did you get into sewing? Like, how did it find you?
It found me similar to thrifting. I would find really cool pieces that were either too big, and mostly too big because I don't like to let things out. Like that's not a sewing
that's not
hack
fun.
or skill. So I'm like, no. But I would find things that are way too big, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll get a sewing machine and I'll just take clothes in. And I remember distinctly, I bought my sewing machine in December of 2017, and I was like, I'm just gonna like alter clothes. Like I'm not gonna make real clothes. Like I said that like 3 different times. Like I'm not gonna make real clothes. That's too much. I just want to do it for my thrifting. And so I bought a sewing machine to complement how often I was thrifting and like having to pass up pieces that were too big.
Oh, so interesting.
And then from there, YouTube, like literally YouTube University taught me everything I know about sewing.
Okay, so at what point did you break then? At what point did you think, oh, maybe I will just try making a garment?
It was actually in 2019 when I bought a serger. I had a coworker at the time who also like, she would make clothes and like take clothes in. I was like, her name was Blanche, which is so funny. I was like, Blanche, how do you make clothes? Like, because she wore this jumpsuit one day. I remember it was a very simple, like overall, like boxy, shapeless overall. And she was like, yeah, I made this morning. I was like, you made that this morning? What?
What a legend.
She's like, yeah, I got up really early. She's like, it was already cut out. I was like, how did you do that? She's like, well, I sewed it, and then I used my serger, and she showed me like what a serger does and how it finishes seams so things don't fray. And I was like, oh, maybe I need a serger. And I am a extreme hobbyist, so as soon as I find something else in my hobby field that I enjoy, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna buy it. I literally bought a serger that day, and then from there, I started to make my own pants, like my own vests. And I was like, oh my God, I'm making clothes. I said I'd never do this.
I love that. So like, no. And you said one jumpsuit and you're like, teach me everything.
And she said it with such ease. She was like, yeah, I just made this morning. It's like, what? I want to be on that level to just be like, oh, I made that this morning. It's after coffee, after the eggs. So that was really cool. That's what inspired me to make real clothes.
Right. So thank you to Blanche.
Yeah, thank you, Blanche. I always tell her too. I was like, I will thank you in every single interview I do, every single podcast I do, because it truly was the inspiration for me attempting to draft and create my own like patterns and clothes.
I love that. So have you been the Blanche for anybody else? Do you know?
I have a few friends who have started sewing because of me. And it always makes me happy because a lot of them have like kind of graduated from being inspired by me to me being inspired by the things that they make. And so that's been so cool. Yeah, I have a really good friend who like has like a vintage business based on him upcycling the vintage clothes that he finds. And so like he'll find different things and then he'll like add to them in really cool ways. Like it's almost like an art. It's really, really cool. Like he'll cut out so many different pieces and like make a flower out of like all this felt he had laying around. And now it's not a regular hoodie. It's like this hoodie with like a flower stemming all around it. Like it's just really, really
amazing.
Cool. So
you have to send me that link. I'd love to see.
Oh, I will. I think his Instagram name is Grandmother Mary's Vintage.
Awesome.
So he sells vintage clothes on top of the custom vintage clothes he does as well. But like everything custom he does always just blows me away. And I'm like, there's no way that you started this because of me, because you were meant to start this anyway.
I was going to say, you were just describing
so cool.
Like how everyone must look at you. Like, I think that stuff you create is just incredible.
Oh, thank you so much.
Where do you get your style inspiration? Well, now you're friends, but...
Yeah. It comes from so many different places. I think that for me, mostly it's based on what kind of jumps out at me when I'm at the thrift store. So if I see a fabric that's really fun and colorful, for some reason I have to leave with it.
So it's kind of fabric first rather than I want to make this specific thing and then you go looking for something for that.
Yeah, it's always fabric first for me because I think the fabric really, for me, tells me what it wants to be. So like, I'll find something and I'm like, oh, this wants to be pants. Like it's sturdy enough for pants. There's a lot of it. I could see like, I like to start to imagine things and then I'll find things like this. So I'm like, oh, it's so lightweight. Oh, that would be an amazing shirt. Oh, what if it had then the different style elements start to come in. But also I think scrolling on Instagram, I'll see different outfits. Or I'll see those sponsored ads from different companies. And I'm like, oh, that's actually a really cool jumpsuit. instead of buying it, I'm gonna just try to like do my take on it and see what happens. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel where I like found a jumpsuit on Pinterest and tried to recreate it, and now it's become one of my absolute favorite like jumpsuit patterns that I've made myself, which is really cool. And I can like always go to it like, oh, I want another jumpsuit. Let me just make it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it starts with fabric, and then I think silhouette after that.
Cool. So do you tend to, I know that you've been playing around with the Mitchell trousers pattern. Do you generally start with kind of existing sewing patterns? Or I know you do a bit of drafting as well.
Yeah. I actually mostly always start with a self-drafted pattern just because I think that's how I was introduced to making my own clothes, was drafting my own patterns.
Did you study that? Was there a course you went on or something like that?
No, it was all YouTube.
Oh, YouTube!
Again. I just remember being like, well, clothing is shapes. And I know like clothing is, or patterns are 2D, but they're to fit a 3D body. So I'll start 2D. Once I put it on, I can make adjustments there. And then you learn about darts and princess seams and all this other stuff. So it is a slower learning process, but I'm like an all-encompassing learner. Like I don't want to, when you start off with just store patterns, like, I want to know how they created that pattern in the first place, because I might not always be able to go buy a store pattern. And actually, when I first started sewing, I did go out and buy a beginner-friendly, and for the people who are just listening, I'm putting up air quotes because it wasn't very friendly, but beginner-friendly pattern. I was like, I like unwrapped this huge brown sheet of paper with like 12 different patterns. And I'm like, nope, I can't do this. I just started to like, I'm going to just do my own patterns and go from there. So the Mitchell has actually been, the Mitchell trouser from Closet Core Patterns has been my first attempt at making pants from a pattern that is not mine. And it's been going pretty well, besides my printing issue.
We've all been
but
there.
outside of that, it's been going pretty. I'm like, oh, I could get used to this.
I know you're going to get lazy now, aren't you? You'll be like, oh, I'm going to buy all my patterns.
Truly. I'm currently teaching like a 5-week sewing course, and I'm having them use a store-bought pattern because through the course, I'm explaining how to use a store-bought pattern, which was never explained to me. But I feel like I'm cheating. I'm like, this is so easy. I love this. So it's been very fun to venture into store-bought and PDF patterns.
Interesting. So of the ones that you have bought, like, what are your favorite brands, or what are the ones that have appealed to you the most?
So I always, because I actually used to work at a Joanne Fabrics, which is really big in America, and like they have plenty of like the top 5, so not top 5, the core 5, like McCall, Simplicity, Berta. So I have a ton of those.
Right.
But it's been really cool to branch out into these indie brands like Closet Core. There's even like Friday Pattern Company has a chore coat pattern that I'm doing with a friend currently. Yes.
I know my patterns.
You really do. So we're actually working on that Sunday of this week, and I'm so excited to help him learn how to sew with that pattern. So I don't have a favorite just yet, and I really want to support like indie pattern brands. And I think having them be PDF is so accessible versus like just being in the stores where you can go find them. So right now I don't have a favorite, but I am enjoying the process of using them, definitely.
Yeah. It's just, as a scene, it's just blown up, hasn't it? There's so much choice now. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite so far that you've made?
Oh, my goodness. You put me on the spot. Do you know what?
Of course.
I love me some dungarees. I love dungarees so much. This pattern is one I've used a number of times. It's called the Hayden dungarees.
Ooh, nice.
By a pattern company called Waves and Wild.
Isn't it cool that like you can find patterns that really fit your personality and like, how you want to feel and how you want to be? I think that's the beauty of sewing. Whether you're self-drafting or buying patterns, that you can really, really shape your wardrobe to how you feel.
Absolutely.
And want to feel. I actually am not a reading learner. I'm a visual learner.
Okay.
So I'll watch YouTube videos all day.
No wonder. You were like, show me the videos. Yeah.
But when I read a pattern instruction, I'm like, wait, you want me to do what? I don't get, do you have a picture? I don't get what you're saying. I just bought a pant pattern from them. I think they are called Modern Sewing Co.
Oh,
they're an English, an English pattern company. But everything is in the metric system. Oh yeah, the workers' trouser.
That was it.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
The workers' trouser, and then I bought their overcoat pattern as well.
They're really nice, simple designs, aren't they?
Oh, and they're so beautiful. I'm all about a matching set, so I'm like, I can make the trouser and the overshirt in the same fabric. But all of their measurements are in the metric system. Oh. I'm like, centimeters? Can you just tell me, because most patterns have both centimeters and inches. And I'm like, I don't know what 160 centimeters is.
Just
And
get
like,
your
you're gonna
tape
make me Google
measure,
this.
turn
Yeah.
it over. As in, has your
I know.
tape measure not got the centimeters on the other side?
Only one of them.
Right.
So it's really odd. I have like 3 different tape measures, and 2 of them, both sides, are inches. But there is one where the other side is centimeters.
That's
so
interesting.
it does help.
Because in the UK, we are such a ridiculous mix of the metric and
Yeah.
imperial.
Yeah.
We all work in both. Generally, when we talk about people's height, that's in feet and inches. But then if you're talking about, like length, that's in metric. If you're talking about weight, that's in metric. But if you're talking about distance, that's in imperial. It's such a stupid mix.
Oh my gosh.
So we're really used to being like, okay, what is this? If I'm talking about zips, it's in inches. If I'm talking about seam allowance, it's in centimeters.
That's like what I have to get used to now. And like, I'm like, man, another roadblock. I already struggle to read this. Now I have to like go and like translate. Okay, wait, 160 centimeters is this many inches. Okay, cool. That's my this. But it's been a fun learning process. I love a good challenge.
It's almost like the sewing community and sewing world it's representative of all different facets, isn't it? Like people from different countries are producing these things in the methods that feel comfortable to them, and we get to kind of experience that in some way through sewing.
It's truly amazing. Like, especially like there's like 7 different ways to do a zipper fly, and like there's some ways I'm like, oh, that makes no sense to me. And then there's other ways I'm like, oh, that actually clicked a lot easier. I'm going to just do that for every single zip. But I really have enjoyed diving into this field more or the community more with these indie brands and how they set up their patterns and their sewing instructions. And I love the community that it fostered with the Mitchell's trouser. It's been so fun to go to the hashtag and like see everybody else's and like what they've done. Like I have a really good friend, Nisan. Her Instagram handle is The Social Fabric. She made them, and she like had a whole blog post about like what she did and like what she liked and what she didn't, and like that's been so helpful. And I'm like, this is so cool. It's almost like you're sewing this with as many people as the internet will allow you to sew it with. So it's been really neat.
Absolutely, I love it so much. I started my blog. Oh God, 2007.
Oh, wow.
2008. Okay, I'm going to say 2008. Long time ago. But and it was really at that point, there was so few indie brands. It was like tumbleweed. And then we'd see another sewer, we'd be like, hey, I'm over here. This is like, pre kind of social media. So having blogs was kind of the only way really to interact. And the amount of time and energy that people would, and still do, put into, like creating little tutorials or writing reviews about a pattern, which is so helpful to other sewers, isn't it?
It really is. Even I had a YouTube channel for a little bit. And I still do have it, but it is a lot of time and energy to like do a tutorial or to do a sew along. I had to call it quits. I was like,
that's a job in itself.
It really is. It's also, I'm happy for the season that I did it, because having people on the internet who can give you information in digestible ways that isn't always digestible for people has been really cool for me personally. So I'm glad I've had a season where I can do that for other people.
Absolutely.
Because I'll tell people, I watched this video and I love that video, and it was, you make sewing look so fun, or you make sewing very digestible. And I'm like, I'm glad that these videos still exist for you, and I would love to teach you in person. But doing video has just been, it was a lot to upkeep. So I'm always like, to the people who have the blogs and the YouTube channels that are so immaculate, I'm like, I know that probably takes so much time and effort. So kudos to them, big time.
Or secretly, they're video editors in their other lives.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Which I would love one, but I cannot afford one currently. So I'm always like, one day I'll get back to it.
But you have a really fantastic and active Instagram account, don't you? And you do kind of do videos and lots of really inspiring stuff on there as well, don't you? Because you don't just your content isn't just about sewing, is it?
Yeah, I feel like for 80% of it is sewing, and then 20% is kind of like the core and the mission of Happily Dressed, which is all about self-awareness and like giving yourself the grace and the freedom to live. And that looks different every single day. Not one breath is the same. So I want to make sure in everything that I do, whether if it's sewing or just talking in general, that I create a space that feels comfortable and open for not just myself, but anyone around me to feel like they can be dynamic. Because we are. Because Instagram has a way of like taking 5 to 20% of who you are and like making it 100%, like blowing that up as if that's all you are, because it's so 2D. But we are 3D, 5D human beings who need the space and grace to evolve and grow and change as our mindsets change, as our viewpoints change. And so I always try to make that apparent in at least one video a quarter on Happily Dressed, because it's so important.
So have you always felt like that? Have you always been that intelligent?
I think it's because I was denied that space when I was younger, in a sense. And I feel like everyone was, to an extent. Like, you grow up, your parents want you to be a certain way. You grow up thinking that the authorities in your life have total control over the way your life should be shaped and lived. As a kid, I'm sure that's relatable. As a child to someone, I'm sure that's relatable. Even as an employee to someone, I'm sure that's relatable. But at the end of the day, this sounds kind of dreary, but you die alone. So you want to make sure that your life is for you and not for anyone else around you.
Absolutely.
Because I always say, when I'm 6 feet under, I want to be happy with a smile on my face that I lived a life for me, and not remorseful or regretful that my life was lived for the people around me and not so much for myself.
So how did you make those discoveries then? How did you go from feeling kind of, as you say, the pressures that you could feel and the kind of direction and lack of control that you have? How did that then turn
Honestly,
around
it was
for you?
like turning rubble into diamonds, like mostly like heartbreak to an extent of not feeling loved or accepted, and like having to grapple with, do I have value if no one tells me I have value? And the short answer is 100% you do. And actually sewing helped me find that. That's why sewing and self-awareness is so synonymous to me, because I found it at a time where I was really discovering my personal power, which we all are innately born with. And I remember I had just been laid off from a job that I really enjoyed, and the circumstances were pretty shitty with how it happened due to a jealous coworker. And I remember being like, man, this job was so special to me. And like that space I created there was so special. And for it to be all snatched away by one envious or whatever, I'm not going to speak too much on that person. But I remember I'd been at home dealing with that. And I was like, my sewing machine's just sitting there collecting dust. And I was like, oh, you know what? I've had this bag idea for a while in my head. Let me just try to make that. I don't have a job right now. I have all this free time. Let me just try to sew this bag. And I remember I had a pair of Dickies red trousers. And I was like, I want to make some kind of like crossbody bag from this. And I remember it took me a day to do. I started in the morning, finished by the night. And I was so proud of what I had made in that day. I was like, wow, I had no previous knowledge of how to do this. And yet I had a vision in my head and I made it a reality. That kind of agency and capability really reminded me that the power is within, and like it's how you shape it in your life around you. And so right then and there is kind of when it clicked that sewing and this sense of capability and agency was something that's going to be with me for a very, very long time. And so it's been a really fun journey. And now I'm in the process of like sharing it, because like, you have to live it and go through it and experience it. And now I think I'm in a really good spot to where I'm so grateful to be able to share that same energy. So hopefully people don't have to go through the heartbreak version of like how to get here, that they can just kind of feel inspired.
It breaks my heart, because hearing how amazing you are, like when I'm picturing you in that job and you created that space that was, you were in this space where it felt amazing. But it was amazing because you were there, It wouldn't have been amazing if you would have been sitting there. You were the link to that. So you take that link and you can put that somewhere else, and you can form. It won't be exactly the same, obviously, because it'll be slightly different, but you're the common denominator.
And that realization was so powerful for me. And what's so amazing, and I think that I was that conduit of joy for that space because of how self-aware I was. And like, that's not a special gift that only I have. We all have that. The more I can share this and the more people who can be self-aware and really in a space to where they want only meshing energy, like the life isn't just good. Like you have to have good and bad, but being in a space that's constructive and helpful to everyone is so beneficial. So the more people in that mindset you have, like the better this world can be. So like, it isn't something that I'm like, oh, that's just me. Like I'm a golden star. Everyone's a star. Like I always say, I am a star because I am.
Yeah.
But everyone's a star. And we can all sit in that energy. Then we have a very bright night sky. Like, isn't that amazing? So, it's been a very fun journey. And sewing has been so synonymous to that journey. So
amazing. So now you are sharing that love by teaching sewing classes.
And that's been amazing. Like I never thought I'd be a teacher. Just because, I don't know, it never dawned on me. And I remember I started sewing lessons very unofficially in 2021. Mm-hmm. I had a student from January to about October. She's a good friend of mine now and happened to be the wife of a good friend of mine then. And he was like, can you teach Rachel? She really wants to learn. And I was like, I don't know. I don't teach. I don't really like that. I don't know if I'd enjoy that. But I said yes. It was the best yes I've ever said, because teaching her really gave me the confidence to do it legitimately. And then in December of 2021, up until March of this year, I did it still unofficially, but more legitimized. So I had like, it's still around COVID. So I had like an hour class for about 4 to 5 people every Sunday. And that really built my confidence that I am a good teacher and that I teach in a really digestible way.
Yeah.
And then finally, officially, I went live with a 5-week sewing course that I'm in currently, which has been so amazing, of like from start to finish. We start with sewing machine literacy, which I think is so important. So it's like how to work your sewing machine, how to thread it, how to wind your bobbin, what all these doodads do and how they're important to you in your sewing journey. And then we go into understanding store-bought patterns, because I think that's also extremely important for those who want to venture outside of pillowcases and totes. And then we go straight into a button-up. So learning to put all that together and sew something that you can wear every day and be proud of. And so it's been so fun. And we meet, it's a group of 5 of us. We meet for an hour and a half every Sunday for the next 5 weeks. We're on class 3 currently. And it's something I want to continue. Like, I love seeing a room full of sewing machines. It's so happy. It makes me so happy. And to see people sit there and like discover their machines and like discover themselves through discovering their machine. It's been such a joy to do, definitely.
It's kind of like when you're teaching adults, they often haven't been in that kind of position for quite a while. And there's like a vulnerability there, isn't there? Sometimes when they're suddenly like, oh, okay. And a lot of feelings can come up, can't they? And it can be joyful to kind of work with those feelings and kind of talk about it. And I think a lot of sewing teaching is like cheerleading in a way, isn't it? Like, you can do this.
And I always say too, because like I am a half full kind of person because I used to be such a half empty. So I'm always like, your first project won't be perfect. Please know that. But it's a stepping stone to getting to progress. Like, nothing will ever be perfect. I'm still learning, and I've been sewing for 3-4 years now. But this is your first step to getting where you want to be quality-wise. You always have to take the first step. And I think, too, with you saying that it's such a vulnerable space, it really is. And I think that teachers, education, sewing, doesn't matter, hobby, skill, teachers have an important role to make sure they're creating a space where people can be vulnerable and not. I have a student who takes in information slower. And she's always like, oh, well, I'm always the last one to finish. I was like, that's not a bad thing. You want to work in your strengths. You work so slow because you're beyond meticulous. If I wanted something done correctly, I'd give it to you before I give it to the person who can sew the fastest.
Absolutely.
So like being that cheerleader and encouraging their strengths and then supporting their weaknesses in ways that you accept them and just build and grow from them. And so that's been really fun for me to do as well, because that feels like it's in my DNA to be that kind of person anyway. So to have that coupled with actually sharing and teaching sewing has been just a dream job, truly, to do. So it's been an honor.
Oh, amazing. I'm so glad you found it.
Same, because it found me. It really did.
So where do you teach? What space do you use? So thankfully,
the job that I work at now, we have a production space where I work at those 40 hours a week. They let me use that space on the weekends, which is so sweet. Yeah, I have some of the best bosses and best people in my corner in the world. They are beyond supportive. And so they let me use that space. But eventually I would love to have my own space. It's really cool. So basically, I have my first big boy goal, which I'm really excited about as an adult, as a young adult. But I would love a nonprofit community space with industrial machines, domestic machines, classes and lessons that kind of work similar to a gym concept where you pay a monthly membership and come use the resources that you might not always be able to afford. And so that's what I'm working up towards, hopefully, with these lessons, is building enough capital to get that started in a way. So fingers crossed for like late next year.
Oh my goodness. That was like my last question. I was like, any plans for the future? I'm like, bam, I love it. Here are my plans.
I'm really, really excited.
And it's totally achievable as well.
I do feel like it is. And that's why I'm like, I'm so scared and excited because I'm like, oh, this is something I can really do. Like, this is something I can really make happen. And I know how beneficial it would be to people who look like me, to people who don't have accessibility to an industrial machine or to courses or to lessons. So I really want to just take what Happily Dressed is as an entity and as a 2D presence and really give it a physical foothold somewhere here in Atlanta. So I'm really excited about that.
I know it's going to happen. Have you got like a kind of time frame in mind, or it's all kind of a bit quite fluid
It's
right now?
definitely still in the conception period, but I would love for there to be a physical representation of this by late next year because there's a lot of logistics that go into this because Happily Dressed is an LLC currently, but for it to be a nonprofit, it would have to go into 501c3 territory, which is like so much legal jargon that I don't always understand. But
Right.
once I can get all of that taken care of, and then like there's donors and grants and like that all just takes time. So I am 100% okay with this being
Yeah.
a slow moving horse because I know once it picks up speed and pace, it's going to be an amazing engine for creatives in Atlanta, for anyone who wants to find a space that helps them feel like them.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you're building your network with people that will be
So
potential
hopefully
users.
by the end of next year, there can be like some groundbreaking physical space. But for right now, I'm totally fine with like going through all the red tape and figuring it all out. So that's where we are currently.
Yeah. It'll be worth it. I'll be cheering from the
Thank you.
sidelines.
Thank you.
Can
I
do
really
it.
appreciate it.
So let me get back to the
Yes.
nitty gritty of
Yes.
what you do, because I need to get back to the whole
Yes.
thrifting.
Yes.
So, okay, what I'm hoping for is that you could give us some sourcing tips, because I have seen a lot of your amazing stuff that you've made, and when you see the
Yes.
before, they are normally
Yes.
things that I would pass over. You're going, so
Yes.
where, okay, first of all, where are your favorite
So
thrift
here
stores?
in America, we have Goodwill, we have Value Village. There is a big warehouse thrift store called Last Chance Thrift Store here in Atlanta that I enjoy. Like the bigger, the stinkier, the better to me. Like I want an adventure. I want to search. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
Like
I feel that thrift stores are so much bigger
they
in
are,
the US
and
than
I've
they are in
heard
the
that
UK.
multiple times. Like I have friends in the UK who are like, the charity shops here are like so small. They aren't as affordable.
They're like the size
Yeah.
of your lounge.
But no, here they're pretty big. Like they.
And you get like shopping
Yes.
trolleys, don't you? Like,
Yeah,
and they're that
it's
big.
funny. I'll go in. I'll go straight to the section where I normally look. If I see there's a lot of options, I'll go back and get a cart. Like that's like how my cart. I'm like, oh, do I need a cart today, or am I just gonna browse? And if I go there, I'm like, oh, there's so much.
Oh,
Okay, I need to go get a
amazing.
cart.
Right, so what's the section you're heading
So
to?
I'm always heading to the linens section. So where you find bedding, pillows, comforters, that's always the prime spot to go. And then there are some thrift stores here, at least, that have a remnant fabric section, which is always very close to the linen section. So you're pretty much staying in one hub, unless you're going to do like
Yeah.
patchwork.
So if you're going with friends, you'd be like, come and find me here later.
Exactly.
I'll be
Exactly.
here.
Like I don't ever thrift with friends because I'm like, you wanting to go thrifting to me
All
is
right.
not what thrifting is. Like if you're coming with me, know that we're going to separate for like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
And then we'll
yeah.
reconvene at the register. Like that's how it goes. So that's where I go. And then so I do have standards of like what I'd pick. So like even if it draws my eye, once it draws my eye, I go over and I'm like, is it too thin? So like any bed sheet, it's probably
Right.
gonna be way too thin. So I immediately skip bed sheets unless they're like a heavier weight linen or jersey, because a jersey bed sheet would be great for a t-shirt.
Yes.
I don't normally
yes.
work with delicate fabrics like jersey, so I will still end up skipping that. But I do always recommend, like, if someone wants to start with making a t-shirt, see if there's any like jersey bed sheets, because that's a lot of fabric, probably for like $2.99, especially for like a king or queen bed sheet. So I normally skip the bed sheets because they're way too thin. My favorite go-to is curtains, because curtains will always have a thickness that I appreciate. I'm not a delicate sewer, so I love working with heavier materials like denim or
Same.
canvas. Yeah, twill. Those are my absolute favorite to work with. So I'll go straight to where the draperies are. So and that's right next to comforters. So like I'll look at the comforters here and there, because sometimes there's some quilted ones that could be a cool jacket.
Yes, which you have proven they can be a cool jacket.
And they're so much fun. They're literally so much fun to make. But then outside of that, I'll go to the drapes first. I'm like, ooh, these drapes have a really cool design. Those can be pants. Like I'm always thinking pants whenever I go to drapes, or a jumpsuit of sorts. So I'll go there first, and then if there's nothing there, I'll go to the remnant fabric section, which can be found next to like yarn and thread, like, because they'll have like random like yarn and like crochet stuff, and they'll have like pillowcases or like bed sheets kind of like wrapped up and not hanging. And like that's where I'll find the remnant fabric section as well. And so sometimes I'll find some really good fleece or Sherpa there, which is really exciting. But for the most part, you're just finding remnant cottons and things like that that can be used for either linings, or maybe you'll find enough for a button up.
Awesome. So, okay. So many questions have led from that. First, you were talking about how you love a set. You love like a
Yes.
cord, a matching set.
Definitely.
So obviously when you're thrifting these items, there is limited quantity. Yeah, how do you approach that? Because of you're dealing with a limited quantity and you've got this vision, how do you make it work?
It is difficult at times. Sometimes, honestly, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cross my fingers so I can get a pair of pants and a vest out of this. And sometimes, like, I'll compromise multiple pockets. So I'll be like, okay, you get one back pocket. You can't do internal pockets because you don't have enough.
Interesting. So you'll develop the finished style based upon the materials available as well.
Yes. And for the most part, I'm always satisfied with just being able to make pants just because I have such an affinity for pants. But if there seems to be more, I'm always like, okay, maybe I can squeeze out a vest. Or maybe I can squeeze out a bucket hat. Like, I only need one more thing to really make it a set.
I love that set you've got, that it's trousers and a jacket and a bucket hat. It's like, it's so
much
good.
fun. Oh, my God. That one, actually. And I found all of that fabric. And I still have probably, like, 3 or 4 yards of that left after making pants, jacket, and a bucket hat. I found that for $9.99 at Goodwill. Like, it was so inexpensive. Yeah.
That's so satisfying.
I don't know why I love a set so much, but it really just makes me feel like just so fun. It's like, oh, cool. I got to just make all these things and like no one else has this. And like, I'm decked out from head to toe in a print I really enjoy. And like, yes, there are moments where you have to like kind of like be tacky police and be like, oh, is this going to be too much? Is this going to be too much? And sometimes the answer is yes.
Is it?
Yeah, so sometimes the sets don't get made because I'm like, this won't work. And honestly, for me, it depends on print size. So the print size is bigger, I can make more things out of it. If the print size is smaller, I think for me, it just ventures into like too much, too quick.
Interesting. So the scale of the print.
It is, yeah.
Dictates what
the bigger the print, the more I can get out of it. Because it's so big that like a pant and a jacket just kind of like fuse into one thing. But the smaller it is, it's like, okay, that's too much. That's overwhelming. For at least for me, in my visual eye, I'm always like, that's too much.
So do you just anything that catches your eye and it's the right weight and what have you get? Or do you have some sort of like checklist where like, well, if I have a vision for it, I'll go for it. If not, I'll leave it. Like, or you just like, get it now, figure it out later?
So that's where the cart comes in because I'll put everything in the cart. That's why I grab it. I'm like, I know I'm going to grab more than I'm going to buy. So I'm going to grab everything in the cart. And then after I've picked through everything and like I've made sure I grabbed what I see someone else eyeing before, I'm like, let me go ahead and get this really quickly.
It's in my personal space. Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, yep, don't come over here. So I'll pillage through all my places. So drapery, remnants, and then like the comforter set. So I'll go to all 3 places first, grab anything that catches my eye, and then I'll have like a little deliberating session with my cart. And so I'm like, okay, I can see something for this. I don't see something for this, but if I enjoy the quality of the material enough, I'll get it anyway. But for the most part recently, because my stash is getting out of control, I've been like, if you don't see what you can make with it, put it back.
There's always more fabric.
Exactly. So recently it's just been more of if I can see something with it and I have an idea, I'll buy it. If I don't, I'll put it back because I have...
Yeah, tell me about your stash.
Oh my God, it's huge. I wish I had a picture to send you. I'm embarrassed. I won't take one. I just had to literally buckle down, and it's still overwhelming. And I'm like, why do I do this to myself? So that's why I'm trying to be more intentional because there are some things in my stash where I'm like, what did I have planned for this? Because it's been sitting here for 6 months, and I'm not sure right now.
Yeah. Do you have a system for making notes or anything like that to retain those ideas?
I need one. I used to organize it by color because that was visually very beautiful. But now I organize it kind of by weight, which does have signification to me. So I'm like, heavier weight always will be pant, coat, or jacket. Lighter weight will always be button up, some kind of throw on tank or something like that. So now it's organized in that way. So I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. But I do have a section of like completely, it's like all linings. So I'm like, oh, this would be a really cool lining either for a jacket or a bag or a bucket hat. And that kind of gets out of control and overwhelming because I'm like, okay, I know I want to use this as a lining, but I know I also don't want to use it right now. So I would love a space for that to kind of exist and disappear for a while until I'm ready to come back to it.
This is why you need to get premises because you can have a whole wall.
And I do. I have a corner of my wall. When we talked in the very beginning about my efficiency of like, cutting out the pattern before I go to sleep, that only works because my sewing station is in my room. It's right there. So it makes sense for me to like, I'm going to cut this out really quickly. And then my bed is literally a feet behind me. I'm going to jump in that and go to sleep. If it was not in the same room, I'm sure I would not be as efficient. But I do need to scale it down, especially now that we're moving into winter. I've thrifted a couple of quilts and bigger, heavier weight fabrics that are a lot larger.
Small.
They don't fold well, they don't store well. So I'm like, oh my God, I need to either make this or stop buying these right now. So I've been on a little hiatus recently from buying fabrics.
So how much of your wardrobe currently is handmade?
Oh my God, I would say at least 60%. And I would say 100% of my wardrobe is thrifted. I'm in kind of a transitionary period, and that's why I think I've gotten into using PDF patterns more recently, because I want more of my wardrobe to be handmade, but I also make such intricate and fun and fancy pieces that they're not every day. I tell people all the time, my closet is so fun. I can't just go in and pick two pieces and put them together. It doesn't work like that, because I make things so intentionally and out of such crazy textiles that like it doesn't always go together. So I'd really like to start building a wardrobe with the mental trouser or the worker trouser and overshirt pattern.
Yeah.
To start having these basics that I can just pull out of my closet and throw on and still feel proud that I made them, but also not have to put on a show every day from like the wild fabrics that I thrift. So yeah, right now I'd say at least 60%, which is still a big chunk, but I'd like it to be a lot more. And that's where these PDF patterns come in.
So so you're kind of going back to basics, making some good
staples.
I
am, and it's really fun. I think a lot of people are inspired by the textiles that I use, and like that's really fun and it's great. And like it is kind of when inspiration strikes, and like I'll make it, and like that was like art. It felt so good, and it felt so good for it to be born now. But then I'm like, I need an everyday wardrobe too. Yeah. Like I need to be sewing like normal trousers, normal pants out of a normal denim. So I'm really excited to get into like the basics again, basically.
Yeah, exciting. Can I just say my favourite things that you've made is that it's like a hoodie and it's made out of a blanket that's got a big car on the front and it's got a fringe.
I actually wore that this week.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's been my favourite make. And honestly, so I'm big on like, not divine intervention, but destiny, whatever. Like I found that blanket in a time where I was doing really, really well. And I really wanted to celebrate that in some physical way. I was like, oh, you know, my life is getting back together because during the pandemic, some things had fallen away that needed to fall away, but it put me in a predicament to rebuild in a way that felt sturdy and strong. And I remember I'd finally gotten to a place where I'm like, I'm living again. I'm self-sustainable again. This is so amazing. I want to celebrate this in some way. And I couldn't really put my finger on it. And I was at Goodwill one day and I found that blanket and it was so big and it was so amazing. I was like, oh, this is my gift. I get to make something from this. And so I took that blanket and I made that hoodie. I actually wore it this week. It's one of my favorite makes I've ever made. It feels so much like me. It's so unique and it's so fun. And knowing that that blanket came to me at a time where I really wanted to celebrate the progress I had made, it was very, very special. So that means a lot for you to say that you like it because it has a special place in my heart.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm going to put a big picture of it in the show notes because I want everyone to see it. So, okay, what I would really like to pick your brains on.
Yes.
Fabric scraps and leftovers. Do you have a system? What do you think is worth keeping? What can then just go? Do you have a way of sorting? So,
yeah. If I've made like 3 or 4 things out of it and there's like literally nothing left, then it is going into the trash. Unfortunately, though I sustainably thrift, I don't always sustainably dispose of my fabric, which is something I'm still trying to figure out. Exactly. And like I think about keeping scraps sometimes to like make scrap pillows or dog beds, but the reality of making that for me is very slim and rare. And so I try to use everything that I have. Like if there's a lot of it, I will keep it until I use it. But when I'm like cutting and like getting things done, for the most part, it just gets thrown away like everything else does in my house.
I think that when you've got a space, like you've got your maker's space, maybe that will be more of an opportunity for, you know, when you are done with something, like I have made a lot of this fabric, then you can put it out there to maybe the people that can't afford fabric at this particular time.
And I love
or whatever.
that. And that's definitely a facet of Happily Dressed that will remain even in a physical space, using thrifted textiles and using donated textiles. I think that's going to be really important to the mission of Happily Dressed.
I love that that's at the core of it, right?
It really is. And just because too, like, I think using what is available to you is such a useful skill, not only just in sewing, but in life in general, because we're not all set up the same, but we also all don't have the same similar work ethic. So if you can work really well with the things that are given to you, you can create more space to have more things either given to you, bought from you. So I think having thrifted fabrics be like a main core of Happily Dressed will be something that never changes. We have enough clothes in this world. We have enough product in this world. And like I'm seeing so many amazing people make patchwork, vests and jackets and pants out of old Dickies and Carhartts, and like going out and thrifting. Right now I have like a bag full of like 4 different pairs of denim jeans that I want to make into a jumpsuit eventually. And I'm like, being able to like take that waste that would end up in a landfill and like make a uniform piece is so crucial. Like if we all started, at least anyone who wanted to know how to sew, started doing that. Because I get the appeal of like all these fabric companies and the beautiful fabrics and textiles that they have. And like you might have a specific thing in mind for your wedding dress or a dress that you want to make. And I completely get that. But for the everyday wardrobe, it's really fun to spice it up with a little bit of individuality, with like getting to like repurpose old clothing, and it frees it from going somewhere that it probably should not end up. So that's been really cool to kind of champion, because it happened organically too. It wasn't like, oh, this world is falling apart, I want to thrift now. It kind of found me in a way that was very synonymous in the way in which I live. And I think that it can be very synonymous to the way in which other people live as well, if they are shown it in that way. So I definitely want to continue that.
Amazing. Well, that sounds like a beautiful full circle.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Please, can I speak to you again when you've got your space, or when you're about to have your space
Oh my God.
up and running?
Yes, yeah, I would love that. This has been so fun, Zoe. Thank you so much for having me. Big time. And also, Zoe's my little sister's name. So I'm always like, oh, I got a message from Zoe. But this has been so amazing. So thank you so much even for the opportunity to speak about sewing, thrifting, and everything happily dressed. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your energy.
Of course. You as well.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!